That's gold. Gold, silver, bronze. It's been suggested by elite athletes in the world, and I'm surrounded by them in this room, that you don't win silver, you lose gold. And when it comes to sport, exercise, results from training, one of the biggest challenges is getting injured. If you've got an injury, you can't compete. Or you have to compete with a major headspace challenges. I've got a weakness in my program, I've got a challenge, I've got something that's handicapping me to be able to achieve my goals. So how do we avoid injury, and what's the gold standard of rehabilitation? What's the gold standard of prevention, which I think is far more important? So let's start there. If you don't want to get injured, what do you need to do? Prevention, anti-risk, to make sure that everything that you do is as safe as possible. Now, there's some things you just can't control. So if I'm in the gym and I drop a weight on my toe, or somebody else drops a weight on my toe, that's an accident and I have to recover that sore foot. Some things you can't control. But isn't it interesting that a lot of the exercise programs that people are given, including elite athletes, are designed to wreck their joints? And if you've got broken joints, doesn't matter whether it's in your neck or your finger or your knee, your hip, your toe, it's going to affect your performance. So a lot of elite athletes, even if they've got just a little tiny broken finger or a little tiny broken toe, it can affect or will majorly affect their performance. So how do you avoid injury? And I think it's a really important question, because isn't it much easier to prevent and avoid than it is to try and rehabilitate? Now, sometimes you have to rehabilitate, but why rehabilitate if you don't have to? So the first thing to do, of course, is to put your X-ray goggles on, because the exercise programs that people do are mostly designed to reduce body fat, increase muscle, get you fit, get you strong, and if you're an elite athlete, they're designed for you to be good at your sport. So we look at the skill of the sport, we look at body fat percentages, we look at measurements, we look at size, and we look at the outside of the body. But surely that should be the last place you look, because if you've got a healthy inside, and if all your joints are strong, muscles, bones, ligaments, tendons, joints can handle pressure, is it possible then that the outcome of your exercise program or your sport or your athletic pursuit, because you can do it because you're not injured, you will have a lean, gorgeous looking body? So rather than focus on the outside, let's put X-ray goggles on and have a look on the inside. And if you are an exercise professional, should that be your responsibility to look at what's happening at each joint when somebody exercises? So there's two parts to injury. There's an injury that's caused by a bad exercise, and then there's injury that's caused by overuse. So even if it's a safe exercise and it's not doing anything bad to the joint, if you do it over and 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 over, you could get injured because you're just using it too much. So we'll start with the joint first. If you have a look at any joint, neck, shoulder, elbow, wrist, fingers, lower back, upper back, the spine in any way, shape or form, hips, knees, feet, doesn't matter which joint you look at. If you put a compression force through a joint or a traction force through a joint, the body's designed to do that. It's a safe movement. The joint pushes together and it pulls apart. And we always use this example. If I put two blocks of wood together and push really hard, or I pull them apart, nothing's going to happen to the wood. But if I put two pieces of wood together and put sandpaper in between, and I start doing this with the wood or this with the wood, and I do it fast with momentum, speed, or put an extra weight on it, I'm going to wear that wood away really fast. Well, our joints are pretty much the same. If you push through them or pull through them, safe or safer, there's still a risk of that overuse injury. But if I push or pull, great. But if I do this to a joint or this to a joint, so I'm doing this movement, or I'm doing this movement, or I'm doing shoulders that this is happening, or I'm knees where I'm doing this over and over and the weight is coming through across the joint rather than through the joint, I will now have what is called a shearing force through my joint or across my joint, which means I'm wearing away the joint. Now, I might not get injured today, I might not get injured the next time I train, I might not get injured for 5 years, but I'm at a much higher risk of injury if I'm doing this to a joint. Now, technically, if you look at all exercises that people do, shearing force injuries are usually caused by isolated exercises, because the human body is designed to work as one beautiful high functioning machine, so that when you run and jump and skip and punch and box, you're using all the muscles in your body, and you're using them all together, and you're using them with traction and compression forces. When you start breaking the body up into little pieces, bicep curls, tricep kickbacks, extensions, leg curls, shoulder presses, upright rows, front rows, side rows, all the things that break up the body into little pieces, we're now putting the joint, which is the limiting factor for injury. If you've got a busted joint, it doesn't matter how strong the muscle is, it's going to hurt like hell and you won't be able to train. So if you want to avoid injury, perhaps consider looking at the joint rather than the exercise as a whole. Look at yes, there's prime mover muscles, but what about the little muscles? So the second part of that is, if the joint's getting shearing forces through it, it's going to get injured at some stage. But then what about the little muscles? Because the next part is recovery. If you don't let a muscle, because when you exercise, when you train, when you lift heavy, when you lift at all, you put micro tears in the muscle. So what happens now is that muscle it's gone into a catabolic state, so it has to recover, regenerate, and then supercompensate, get stronger. If I don't allow that to happen, if I train and the muscle hasn't recovered yet, it hasn't regenerated from my last workout, I'm going to put more micro tears in the muscle. And then I go and train again and I put more micro tears in the muscle. And I'm more likely to get injured because I haven't given my body time to recover and regenerate and supercompensate, which means get stronger. So, to me, that's just common sense. But what people do is they say, well, I'll break the body up into pieces. So one day I'll do legs, and one day I'll do upper body, and one day I'll do arms, and one day I'll do calves. And we break the body up. But there's two parts to that. One is the endocrine system and the central nervous system fire up all of our muscles. So if they get tired, you're more likely to get injured because you're not focusing on your exercise program effectively. And that's when people trip over and drop weights on their toes because they're not thinking about what they're doing. But the little muscles that drive the lower body exercises are the same little muscles that drive the front of the body exercises and the back of the body exercises. So the shoulders, for example, are involved in every upper body exercise, but they're also involved in lower body exercises, because if you do an effective deadlift or squat or lunge, you pick something up off the ground, you're going to be using your shoulders as well. Now, it's not just the deltoid, and that's a tiny muscle in itself, but inside the shoulder joint, you've got 4 tiny little rotator cuffs. Subscapularis, infraspinatus, teres minor, and supraspinatus. There you go. Don't want to sound technical, but they're tiny. Big names, tiny muscles. Tiny. And they hold your big humerus in your shoulder cavity. So if you're constantly using those tiny little muscles, they don't recover. So they're used in pushing, they're used in pulling, they're used in lifting off the ground. So what happens now is they get busted really easy. So you end up with a shoulder injury, and you might get that shoulder injury while you're doing a deadlift, which is technically supposed to be a lower body exercise. So you can do whatever you want, of course, everybody does. I used to do stupid exercises. My life was full of stupid exercises until I learnt my anatomy and physiology. So the two parts there is, have I given the little muscles time to recover? And usually the answer is no, and that's why we get injured. And second, if I'm putting shearing forces across my joint, I'm going to get injured. It's not if I get injured, it's just when. Now, I'll just put an interesting side note on that. If you are an exercise professional, you might not injure somebody's joint the first time you train them, but you might. Because if somebody already has an underlying injury challenge, so they might be a netballer, so their knees are already constantly in that rotation position. They might be a kayaker, they might be a tennis player. They might sit down all day, so their lower back's already weak. They do a sport that is constantly overloading those joints in a shearing force position, and sport is notorious for that. So let go a little bit further. They could be a tradie, they could be working in a warehouse where they're lifting stuff all the time. And they come to you for the first time with underlying injury already that they don't know about, and you put them in a leg extension or give them an upright row or give them a bicep curl, and you screw up their elbow, their shoulder, their knee, their lower back in their first session. Can you imagine how awful that would feel? That's other people. What about you? Why would you do that to yourself? So would it be I ask this question every day. How about learn how your own human body works? Because you have to live in it for the rest of your life. So what's happening at the joint and the little muscles that I'm using in any exercise, whether it's a sporting activity or a weightlifting activity or I'm running, the little tiny ones, will they have time to recover? And I wouldn't train them again until they're fully recovered so that I don't get injured. Then if we go to overuse injury, there's a real challenge there, because running, safe exercise, upright position, compression forces through the joints, the human body's designed to do that. But if you do it over and over and over and over and over, bang your feet on the ground, bang your feet on the ground, bang your feet on the ground. And this is coming from a lady that's run 21 marathons, and I will never do long distance training again. Very happy to go and run a marathon, but there's no purpose. If I'm fit and I'm strong and mentally tough, I can go and do anything. I don't need to do long distance running to get fit for a marathon. And if you understand how the human body works, we know that, because when you're really fit with 100% effort with high intense activity and you're really strong, every ligament, tendon, joint, muscle in your body is strong and no risk of injury, then running a marathon, for example, is just mental toughness. You're fit enough to do it, you're strong enough to do it, you can now go and do it because you're mentally tough, and you get more mentally tough from doing high intense activity. So that's just an interesting side note. But let's just say you get injured, and I'm standing here as an old lady that's busted every single joint in my body at some stage. I've got an L4, L5, and you don't need to know about my injuries, but I've been told that I would never run again and I'd never be able to lift anything heavy because I've perforated my disc L4-5 in my spine, and if you look at my x-ray, I have no disc left, it's gone. I've been told twice that I need to have knee reconstructions because people have looked at an x-ray and said, Rowie, your knees are screwed up, you need to have new knees. And because I'm an old lady, there's every joint in my body hurts because I've done stupid exercises which I refuse to do anymore. And I now, because I'm really fit and really strong, invest in a massive amount of time in my garden where I'm lifting logs and rocks and wheelbarrows full of gravel and sand and raking and picking. So I get injured fairly regularly, even though I'm fit and strong, because if I go out raking and picking, I might do that for 3 hours and I end up with a busted intercostal or something in my ribs, because I just love being fit and strong, and I can keep going because I'm fit and strong. And I'm sharing that with you because yes, injuries happen. Now, the biggest challenge with injury is if you stop moving, you reduce your circulation and your muscles and bones waste away. So a muscle can't get strong if it's wasted away. If you're doing nothing. Now, it's really good to do nothing in between workouts so that you can regenerate, supercompensate, get stronger. But if you don't give your body, if you give your body too long to recover, so you're just sitting doing nothing, and your circulation slows down, your metabolism slows down, everything takes longer. And I'm sharing that with you because if you want to rehabilitate an injury, here's a great thing to consider. What can I do? Not stop doing everything. And that's what happens to most people. They go to the physio or the doctor or the chiropractor or something. Oh yes, you've got a busted this and you should rest. Well, the challenge with resting is that every other muscle, ligament, tendon, joint in your body's going to be rested, as is your heart and lungs, and you lose your fitness very quickly and you can lose your strength very quickly. So what can you do when you're injured? And that's one of the beautiful things about the human body. It tells you that it's injured because it hurts like hell. And if you exercise in a range and it hurts, you wouldn't do that. But if it doesn't hurt, you can still do it. So for example, if my back's busted, I still can squat. I still do in fact, I do heavier squats because I can't do a full range of motion because I've got a sore back, but I can do a short range of motion. So I squat in that short range and I can lift heavier because it's only a short range. I have a boxing bag for a reason, and I have a cross trainer for a reason, and I've got a very fun story about the cross trainer. I had a busted knee, and because of my busted knee, I tripped over and busted my elbow. So I had a bung knee on one side and a bung elbow on the other side. But I still used the cross trainer because I used one arm and one leg, and the other two had a rest. So the injury rested, but I didn't rest my body. I still want and the really important thing to get going here is endorphins, which is a pain-killing neurotransmitter. So if you want to feel good and you want to have a stack of energy, it's really nice to train. Obviously, people say, Rowie, how often should I exercise? I always say exercise because you want to feel good. And that's the most important reason. And if you're going through an injury, a lot of people get depressed and angry and grumpy and often don't go back to their exercise because they're injured. But if you work around your injury, so where is the injury? Don't screw around with the joint if it's busted. So don't use that joint. but work within your pain range and do what you can do. So it might mean that you have to ride a bike, or you have to go swimming, or you have to do light weights with some other form of activity. But you've got to work out a way, because if you don't do anything, it's not just your body that rots away and wastes away, your brain rots and wastes away, and you end up being a person who is very bitter and twisted about the injury, and you may never recover. Now, I know that sounds very negative, but I've worked with a lot of people like that. They got a knee injury or a back injury and they never did anything ever again. The reverse of that, some people lose a leg or lose 2 legs and they go on to become Paralympians and win gold medals. There's people who have serious injury and they go from one sport to another. So it's all a choice. So if somebody says to you when you're injured, you shouldn't do anything, ask why. Why wouldn't I do anything? And there's an even better question. Who has recovered from this injury the fastest? Because they'll tell you the average recovery time is 6 weeks or 8 weeks and you shouldn't do anything. So who's recovered the fastest? And I always ask this question. If I were to go in the Guinness Book of World Records for the fastest recovering person of this particular injury, how long would that take? And I've proved so many medical professionals wrong who've said, Rowie, you can't, it's going to take 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, and 2 weeks later I'm back to 100%. Now that's just me, because I just choose not to let injury stop me. So as I shared, I will use a cross trainer, I'll use a bike if I have to, I'll go swim. I hate going swimming and I hate bike riding, but I will if I have to, so that I can still do something. I love boxing the bag. I can have a really sore knee, but I can still box the bag. I can have a really sore shoulder, but I can still use the cross trainer and use my legs. I always find a way, and that's all I'm asking. If you want to be healthy, fit and strong, would you always find a way, or would you make an excuse? So look after your body, put your x-ray goggles on, have a look at what's happening at the joint so you can prevent injury, have a look at what little muscles are being used so they don't get overused so you can prevent an injury. And if you are injured, keep moving within the pain range so that you don't let your body waste away, you don't let your brain waste away, and you can keep living your life to the max even if you've got an injury. Goals!